Hi, Tricia. I'm so
Hey,
excited to have you on. How's it going?
good. Thanks for having me.
I see in your background you have Heal Your Hunger. It's
That's
a,
right.
and that's been the slogan you've been using for a long time, about what, 20, 30 years?
No, I mean I've been doing this work for 32 years, but Heal Your Hunger, I think I trademarked Heal Your Hunger about 10 or 11 years ago, but I really started my Heal Your Hunger business and my online program, my book, everything about 3.5 years ago.
And that was inspired, the Heal Your Hunger, by your own kind of struggle. Can you tell us a bit about your personal story? What draws you to this work?
You bet. Totally based on my own experience of being out of control with food. So, as far back as I can remember, Jared, I was just totally in love with food. I just love to eat. Yes, I did. So, I was an emotional eater, but I didn't know that. I thought I just liked food. I like to cook. I like to serve food to other people. I love to shop for food, and obviously eat. And so it was really a big highlight for me going out to restaurants all throughout my childhood and into my 20s. And um, unfortunately, I gained weight very easily. So, being into food's not a big deal if you don't have a weight problem. But, I did, and I put on weight very easily. So, a lot of times during my growing up years, I was overweight and really hated it. Like, it was really a problem for me. And not it doesn't bother everybody to the same degree. And so for me it was just like a constant obsession. Like, I was obsessed with my weight. I had this roll on my tummy that I would scrunch up and imagine cutting off the way, how you can cut this like fat off the side of a steak,
Yeah.
and I'm looking down, I'm like, well, it's just fat. Like, I probably should be able to cut it off. And thank God I didn't try that one. And then I, thought about, gee, if I join the army, they'll force me to exercise and go through boot camp, and I'll lose weight that way because I hated exercise. And then I also had these drastic thoughts like, oh, if I got some disease, I'd lose weight without even trying, or I'd lose my appetite. So these really crazy, desperate thoughts about my weight because I was so out of control of food. And it was never a conversation about how I could eat less because I didn't think that my overweight came from overeating, and so it was just like this weight. I was always focused on the weight. And
Yeah,
yeah,
kind of like you were focusing on like burning it off or cutting it off. Like sometimes you hear that, like, let me just exercise a ton to, burn 10,000 calories or whatever.
yeah, symptom control basically, which was not going to work for me. So it doesn't work for anybody. It's why 98% of all diets fail. So I
What was that?
basically,
Symptom control?
yeah, right? I mean, overweight is a symptom. I was
Ah,
overeating. So, and most people are focused on losing the weight as I was. So, pills and potions and lotions and diets and exercise programs, all those things are to lose the weight. But I never addressed the fact of why I gained the weight in the first place is because I was an emotional eater, basically.
ah,
So that's what I mean is the symptom of
yeah.
weight, was always where I was attacking, but it was never going to get me where I needed to go because I wasn't dealing with the cause, which is that I was compelled to eat for emotional reasons and I was overeating.
And so, how do you make that switch from thinking of joining the army to ultimately taking responsibility for the root causes of emotional eating?
Well, first of all, let's be clear, I would be have been kicked out of the army within like a week. They'd be like, this girl is clearly not qualified for the army. so um so I just fortunately didn't do that. But yeah, I mean, I was desperate. I mean, I got to that desperate place where everything I tried failed me. I mean, I even went to a 12-step program, and I went to therapy. I had an eating disorders therapist. I literally went twice a week to an eating disorders therapist for a year.
Ah,
So, yeah, and I actually lost a bunch of weight through all my different measures, but I had done that so many times. I'd gone up and down the scale. I was really a yo-yo dieter, and so I'd gone up and down the scale, and I had lost a bunch of weight this time. And when you're losing weight, it's such a high. It feels so darn good because, when you've been overweight for so long and you feel crappy about your body, don't fit in your clothes and you're just wearing yoga pants all the time, it's a really shitty feeling. Okay. So when you start to lose weight, you just get this high and you feel so good and people are starting to notice and it carries you for a while. Like it just feels so good. It kind of fills that hole that food had filled, but it's
absolutely.
temporary, it's temporary. And so what happened is when I started to reach my goal weight, I started to get depressed because I no longer had that high feeling because I was kind of settling into a smaller size body. And I was obsessed. I mean, I was so obsessed with my weight. I had like I would shop because I was all of a sudden fitting into clothes. And it just, again, the obsession with losing weight replaced the obsession with food and gaining weight. So, but I got to this point where I had lost a bunch of weight and the newness of it all had started to wear off. And I was having all the feelings that I had buried with food started to emerge because they
Ah,
didn't have, their hiding place was fat. And
ah,
so, as the fat was melting off of me, the feelings were coming up, and that was creating a sense of depression because I didn't have any tools to deal with those feelings. And to
interesting.
me, this is why people go back to eating is because they think, oh, if I lose weight, I'm going to be happy. It's my lifelong dream to be in a thin body and be able to date and just not feel like a pariah. But the bottom line is, there's a whole nother layer of this deal, which is how do you live in a thin body and an excess of emotions that you typically don't feel. We were talking before the show about numbness, and that's what I had been, as numb to all these feelings. So the feelings were coming up. I was getting depressed, and I was just about to go back to the food, which again is, I think, a very typical pattern for people. And I was just about to go back up the scale again. And Jared, I felt so desperate, like, oh my God, I have done this so many times. I can't do it again, And I just saw my life flash in front of my eyes where for the next 80 years, I'd be doing this yo yo thing. And I thought, I cannot do this. And
Right.
that was the moment where
Huh.
I decided I had to take a different tack and I couldn't keep trying to lose weight. And by the grace of God, I was introduced to somebody who helped me really dig deeper and deal with the underlying causes so I didn't have to keep fighting food and weight anymore. And that was it. That was what changed everything for me. And I was able to, live in a thin body, and it's been decades now.
Yeah, I saw on your website that that was a huge part of your story, and I think it's so true. You're right. Like the validation you get from other people, how the journey of losing weight can whether you're getting validation or other people's attention or respect or positive encouragement, you're there's that maybe a hole in a hole. I always said when I was growing up, I had a hole in my heart, and that was because I was numb. And when you're numb, you can't connect, and then when you can't connect, there's a hole in your heart. And
Yeah.
that's my language for it. But sometimes I think of that sounds like weight loss can cover that hole up.
Well, yeah. I mean, to be honest, any obsession can,
True.
and I call it a hole in your soul, or a hole in
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
soul, for
Yeah.
sure. And yeah, I mean, to me, I mean, I have an addictive personality, so I can get addicted to anything. And if it feels good, why not, if it's worth doing, why not overdo it? So,
Yeah.
that's kind of how I've always rolled. But,
And
but
some people have
basically,
more addictive personalities. It's just like whether it's genetic or whatever. That's part of your story as
yeah,
well.
it
Yeah.
totally is. I mean, when I drank, I overdrank, when I obsessed about, men, I just kind of went off the rails with it. So it was always like just, the bottom line is I was a relief seeking missile.
Mm,
I was looking for relief. I was looking to escape my feelings. And through
yeah.
my research of many decades, 32 years of research, um, what I've identified are three primary emotions that people do try to escape from if they have some sort of addiction. And this certainly is, to me, very apt for emotional eaters and or food addicts, if you will. And so I call it the Pep Test, so people can identify these feelings quickly in themselves. And so the Pep is an acronym, and the first P stands for painkiller. So what I was running from is pain,
Mm,
emotional pain. Pain from a relationship that's not working, pain from a job that's stressful, pain from taking care of a parent, or some mental illness in your family. There's so many reasons why we feel emotional pain. And my experience is people who struggle with food and weight, they had pain as a child. And I know for myself, I just made this subconscious decision to avoid pain because it was so painful. And so throughout my life, I just didn't want to feel pain. I just wanted the happy, happy high notes. Just
me
give me the
too.
fun. Yeah, right. Give me the fun stuff. Like, just you can take the pain like somewhere else. Like, it's for the birds. So,
Yeah, and so
um,
many times too with pain, we instead of being there with the pain, we can make it worse. Like, you're feeling pain, like you're failing, right? It's like
yeah.
we
Oh,
we stack
yeah.
pain on top of pain.
So true. Yeah,
What
we
was
sort
the
of beat
E?
ourselves up.
Yeah, what
So
was the E?
the E stands for escape. And I think, people, again, same idea, like uh life gets stressful, life gets hard, life gets fearful, especially when there's a pandemic, you walk out your door, you could die. So people just want to escape, and that's why I believe we've had the quarantine 15, is that our reality has gotten really scary. And so people just want to check out, the TV and the chips and the ice cream and, baking, a whole lot of baking at home. And so it's really just a matter of people just like having a lot of fear and want to escape the fear and worry. And food is a great way to do it. I mean, grab your goodies, sit in front of the television, and just check out.
Yeah.
The last P in the PEP formula is punishment. So we use food as a form of punishment. And people don't really think of
Uh,
this, Jared, because food seems like a reward. Like the food is what we do when we have had a hard week and we want to reward ourselves. But if anybody is like me and goes overboard and they don't just eat a bowl of ice cream, but they eat the whole, pint or half gallon, and then they don't just have one bowl of cereal, they'll go back for two or three bowls of cereal, and the chips and the whole bag of Hershey's Kisses, and it's like before you know it, you feel totally stuffed and disgusting, and you have ice cream stains down your front, and all of a sudden you're not feeling like you've been rewarded. You feel like you've been beat up by food. And
yeah.
it's really, it's an abusive relationship, if you will. And
Mm,
so that begs the question, like, why would I do that to my body? Why would I eat to feeling sick and hating myself and berating myself for losing control? Why would I do that to myself? And I really believe that as emotional eaters, we do have a lot of unconscious guilt. And part of this is that we feel very deeply. Emotional eaters are deep feelers,
mm,
and so we have strong feelings, and especially feelings of guilt, where we think we're bad, we think we're wrong. Somebody looks at us sideways, and we feel like we've done something terrible, but we don't know what it is, or that we say things that we don't mean to say, and then we just replay it in our minds and we overthink it to death, and we ultimately just punish ourselves with food. So to sum it up, the PEP formula are ways that, it's an indication of pain, fear, and guilt, and these are the things that the emotions that primarily drive
uh,
our emotional eating. And there's tangential feelings off of those three primary feelings: pain, fear, and guilt. So many, but I like offering people that PEP formula so that if they are, listening and they do sort of at first be like, I just like food, I don't really eat for emotional reasons, next time you find yourself going to the refrigerator 5 times of an evening, start to check in and say, is there
Yeah.
something I'm avoiding? Like there's some kind of pain I don't want to deal with, or am I
Mm.
worrying about something, or feeling guilty about something? And you can start to see the emotional connection between our cravings and our emotions.
I almost feel that weight loss can also function as like you know, let me focus on the calories. Let me focus on the weight. It kind of can also play a similar role. Let me escape some sort of pain that I'm in.
No
Yeah.
question about it. And any obsession, I mean, getting obsessed with buying shoes online, it's like there's any number of things that when we get kind of, intense and focused on something, that is, and it serves as, yeah, an escape and a painkiller, and ultimately it exhausts us, and it can distract us from doing our job or paying our bills or whatever. So obsessions definitely serve that purpose, and whatever it is. It's just that food was so good, and yes, the obsession with food is one thing, and then the obsession with controlling the food, and obsession with getting rid of the effects of the food after we've eaten, the whole thing, the whole kit and caboodle, is part of that whole system of avoiding our feelings.
What's your advice for someone? Because I think you're talking about really like getting down to the root of something. Do you suggest like when you're getting down to the root of something that you just need to like not not forget about weight loss, but like, you know, put the priorities on your emotions first? Like how do you handle weight loss and talk about weight loss when you're trying to do some deeper work?
Yeah, so it's kind of like which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like, do you lose weight and then you feel your feelings, or you feel your feelings and then you lose weight? And I really feel like it's both, and it can be either or, but my experience is that you have to. I often say you have to feel your hunger in order to heal your hunger. So, if you are numbed out all day long because you're snacking all day long and you're just kind of on that in that chill place of feeling no pain, you're not going to know what your emotions are, and you're not going to be able to deal with them. So you do have to have some parameters, in around food and in your diet, so that you can start to access those emotions. And I recommend something which I coined 3 meal magic, which is eating 3 meals with nothing in between, because this is going to give you some space in between your meals to where you're going to feel a little bit of hunger, and you're also going to feel feelings. And sometimes the hunger is emotional hunger, where you're really just accessing emotions you've normally been dead to, and that's uncomfortable. But if you stick it out and you stick to those 3 meals and you don't snack, you're going to get, acclimated to feeling feelings. And that's the only way to heal. Like, you have to feel those feelings in order to be able to face them and really gain tools for dealing with them. And you have to have tools. You can't just expect to lose weight and be happy go lucky, because that's not going to happen. I mean, think people, again, that high of losing weight is great, but it will fade. It will fade. And if you don't have a toolkit of tools to address those feelings that come bubbling up, you're going to be running for cover in food again. So,
Yeah.
being able to address those feelings and having tools for doing that is super vital.
And I really appreciate what you said too about just like getting on some regular eating. Like I feel like that is so much of a can provide a lot of stability, and sometimes when you're starting this journey, it's there's so much confusion, like feeling my feelings like okay, I'm upset all the time, like there's just too much going on. and and I really appreciate that little bit of advice there to start off with some regular eating, and then that can kind of soften the or kind of land help you land the plane, so to speak. Kind of
Yeah.
start feeling your hunger.
Yeah.
Um, and what are some of these tools that you're mentioning? So you're regular eating. You're starting to let yourself feel hunger, and you mentioned some other tools that are important to help process feelings.
for
What's like
sure.
thing that comes to mind for you?
I call it the 6 self-care success secrets, and this is what I teach my clients to do. And
I
um,
love your acronyms, by the way. Like,
yeah, we got to make it fun. We got to make it fun. Otherwise, we'd just be crying in our milk.
I love it.
So the self-care is so important. And so much of the time overeaters are overdoers. And so we love to just pop out of bed and look at our phone and jump up and take care of the kids and get out there and get it. And we're on the go, go, go. And a lot of that busy work, and busyness for emotional eaters is part of that avoidance of our feelings. So, if you want something done, give it to an overeater because they want to, well, first of all, they're people pleasers. We'll get to
Yep.
that in a minute.
Yep.
But they're always doing, and that has to change.
Mm.
People expect to lose weight, as I said, and be happy, but they're not going to be able to sustain that weight loss if they don't change the way they're living. And I often say it's not an eating problem, it's really a living problem. And this on the go thing, it cannot be sustained without overeating. Because when we're
Mm.
stressed out and constantly going and we're totally out of touch with our emotions because we're running from them like running from a saber-toothed tiger, we don't know what we're feeling. We can't deal with it. And it's going to slam us right into the food. And so we have to start living differently. And that means starting our day with a self-care routine.
Mm.
And I meditate every day, and it's a non-negotiable for me, like at 20 minutes in the morning. And I also do 20 minutes before dinner, which I always say, if anybody feels like that's just ridiculous, I guarantee you'll eat 200 calories fewer at dinner if you meditate or take quiet time before you go into the kitchen
Ah.
at dinner time.
Oh, I
So
love that.
oh yeah, there's a direct causal effect, from meditating because, for the emotional eater specifically, because, we are so busy and overeaters are overthinkers and we're constantly, our minds are racing and we're thinking and thinking and thinking. We drive ourselves nuts by overthinking, and we've got to like settle our minds down. We have to settle our
Yeah.
bodies down. A lot of
Mhm.
us have trauma, and so we're constantly in reaction mode all the time. And it's like we have to really come into this sort of symbiotic relationship with our bodies, and meditation is a great way to do that. And you can do a guided meditation on your Insight timer, an app on your phone, or doesn't have to be total silence. I do like a TM type meditation practice, but whatever calms you down. And some
Yeah.
people might not meditate and they just might want to do yoga stretches or whatever. It's like anything beats just getting up and going. And you have to feed your soul. you
Mm.
know Emotional eaters are starving. Okay, they're
Mm.
starving for real nourishment, and that's spiritual nourishment, that's connection with other people.
Mm.
And so I start my day by
Yeah.
nourishing my soul, and I have to
Mhm.
do it. And there are
Mhm.
many days, Jared, where my head's like, I do not have the time for this. Like there is just not enough hours in the day to be sitting here going home. Not that I go home, I don't say home, but I mean, it just seems so darn impractical. And yet it is
Yeah.
so practical because what I'm doing is I'm working smarter instead of harder. When I meditate, I'm tapping into the divine. I am like hooking up with, universal energy, whatever you want to call it, with God, with, Holy Spirit, anything that it's infusing me with the power to get through my day. I don't
Mhm.
have that power. I certainly don't
Mm.
have willpower. But when I
Mm.
when I tap in with my divine spirit in the morning and I do spiritual readings that just kind of get my head on track, in a positive direction, much less susceptible to awfulizing, considering the worst possible scenario. And it's like I just have a more centered day emotionally. And then later in the day, I really call it like putting deposits in your spiritual bank account. Because later in the day, when the stress is built up and you're super tired, you can make debits on that account, and take some spiritual money out of that bank account instead of eating, instead of turning to chocolate to fuel you through. So
Mm.
it's so important, and it's not easy to do because it isn't, our culture is not geared towards taking, an hour in the morning for spiritual practices. Like, we're just not built that way. And yet for the emotional eater, it's vital. It's not just a good idea. Like, a lot of people know they should meditate and they're like, yeah, I know I should. I know it's good for you. Like, cat's out of the bag. Like, this isn't the 60s when, meditation had just come to the US, from India. This is like, we all know it. It's pretty much common knowledge. The science is there, but people don't do it. But for the emotional eater, it's really a non-negotiable. Like, I have to take
Oh,
quiet time in the morning in order to expect any success around not turning to food, because we use food for fuel. I mean, not just physical fuel, but we use it for emotional fuel. We use it for energy. We use it for entertainment. We use it for love, for comfort, for avoidance. I mean, so many different reasons why we use food. And when you take care of those needs in a healthier way, then you can get back to using food because it just fuels your body, in the best possible way. Of course, we're meant to enjoy our food. So it's not like you're just like eating to nourish only. We should enjoy our food, but not for all those other emotional reasons.
absolutely. And I really like the idea of your group training programs because I feel like one of the big struggles, and you mentioned this earlier, was guilt. Guilt just wrecks
Yeah.
people. Like, they start
Yeah.
off and then they screw up a little bit or whatever, and that guilt, it's like you make 5 steps of progress, and then the guilt, just like that intensity, it's like you lose like 100 steps and you're like, why bother hiking up this hill if I'm gonna go downwards, and that's what it
Yes.
feels like. And I feel like the group situation can help maybe normalize mistakes, or how do you coach people or trade people? How do you talk about making mistakes, especially when you're beginning with self-care? Sometimes, like, i- i- when people begin with self-care, it's almost like they have like their arm cut off and they're putting a band-aid on it, and it's like, it's like the hole is too big and you're just doing a little bit, and that little bit can feel like it's not enough, and it
Yep.
can bring up feelings of shame, and my
Yep.
thing has been shame. I relate to that. It can feel like you're in a sticky tar pit, and it just, you're trying to get out, but it's like you're smothering it all over you. Anyways.
Yes. 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 So, helping people to really have the right perspective with themselves is a challenge, because as I said, emotional eaters are so hard on themselves, and they're always thinking, and what did I do wrong? And what could I have done better? They're always dissing themselves, they're never
Yeah.
good enough, and that's a lot of what the root cause is just not feeling worthy and good enough. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it comes out in
Yeah.
that way of just always like replaying things we said, and oh God, I can't believe I said that, I should have done better. And of course, around eating, like, oh, I'm so bad, I didn't follow the diet, and why did I eat that? And it just goes on and on and on. So something I love is the statement "progress, not perfection." And that comes from the 12-step programs, and it's just a great reminder that we're all fallible, and we're just here trying to improve a day at a time, and nobody's going to do it perfectly. And to me, you never, I mean, I'm still an emotional eater, and I can, fall into that trap if I don't do the self-care, if I don't do all the steps that I teach people in my program. There's no cure. It's a day at a time. So one day at a time, we do the best we can, and if we mess up, big deal, get back on the horse as soon as possible. Because if you go down that road of I'm so bad,
Yeah.
mea culpa, you're just going to make it worse and perpetuate the behavior. So it's so
Hmm.
important to learn to be gentle with ourselves, and also to understand the cause of it.
Yeah.
So so
No.
yeah, so I always tell people, like, instead of just beating yourself up for eating something or having a binge or whatever, realize that we overeat. Again, back to that pep formula, we eat because we're afraid or we're in pain, or we're, having some kind of feeling we determined was intolerable to feel. Okay,
Mm.
so we're using that food as a form of escape and a painkiller, and that's it. Like, and what we need to do is learn how to have a bigger container for emotions, and realize that we can feel more emotions, than we think we can, because we're so emotion adverse, or averse, and so it's just really important to know that that's why we eat. We don't eat because we're bad. We don't eat because we're lazy, or we're slobs, or whatever terrible things we like to tell ourselves. We eat because we're afraid, and we're afraid to feel whatever feeling we're feeling at the time. And if we can just start to try to learn to tolerate a bigger birth of feelings, or breadth of feelings, I guess, we're gonna do better next time. But that's not
Yeah,
easy. It's
it's
easy to
not.
say,
Yeah.
but when we've been avoiding our feelings for our whole lives, it's not easy to do. And again, that's why the group, support is so important, because you're not the only one doing it. And it does get normalized when you hear other people, having different kinds of emotions and going through stuff. You realize that you can go through it too. It makes it so much easier. And it together, there is power in numbers, and together we can fuel each other, support each other, cheer each other on, lift each other up, when we're down. Just the whole thing. Like, life is so much easier when we're connecting with people who understand and care.
Absolutely. And as we kind of wrap up today, can you tell us more about, you got your it's a Heal Your Hunger show?
I do have a podcast called the Heal Your Hunger Show, and we deal it's all about the underlying causes. So I like to talk about, what's going on. And I often just talk from my personal experience. Again, I'm still an emotional eater, I'm in recovery, but I'm still, dealing with life issues that, if I don't deal with them, will lead me back to food. So I talk about those life issues. I talk about, but it's the real stuff. It's not about diet and exercise, because, like, we've had that. We know about that stuff. We have to talk about life. It's life that drives us to the refrigerator, the stress of life. And so, what is that stress? How can we act differently? I have something, that I teach in my program called the Anatomy of the Emotional Eater, Jared, and it's 24 personality traits that really emotional eaters have. Okay, they don't necessarily have all 24.
You
Typically, they
mentioned
have.
people pleasing. You mentioned people
Yes,
pleasing. That's like the number
thank
one.
you. That is the number one. And it's a really good example of why it's not a food problem, but a living problem. So let's talk about that. I have never met an emotional eater who's not a people pleaser, frankly. And I took the cake
Yeah.
on this, pardon the pun. So basically, what the problem with people pleasing is that, first of all, we're doing it usually from a place of lack. We didn't get the validation we wanted or needed as children. I mean, that's usually
That's what
true,
it comes down to.
right?
It's like
So,
that's so key.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we didn't get it. So we're constantly seeking it from outside of ourselves. We don't have it for ourselves. It's like, if I can get Joe, and Shirley and Devin to approve of me, I will feel okay. I will be okay. I will be validated. But it's so short lived, because it's coming from outside of us, that we have to keep seeking it. And that's how we develop that pattern of people pleasing, which is, it's so unhealthy. And it's really, I mean, it's a disease in and of itself. That
And I
disease
think what
please.
happens too is they're people pleasing, and that contributes to the running around all day. They're trying to have their
Yes,
kids be good, have their husband be good, have their boss be good, have the bills paid on time, blah blah blah. Everything
yes.
is good, everything is pleasing outside, but then again there's this hole in the soul for them.
Yes, and that's the problem, is that when we're saying yes to everything, like, yes, I'll do the extra errand. Yes, I'll host the party. Yes, I'll do the extra project at work. What happens is, first of all, people expect it. They come to take it for granted that, oh, give it to
Yeah.
her again, give it to an overeater. She's always overdoing, and so we're always taking on that project. And we're running ourselves ragged, doing
Yeah.
all this extra work that's not ours to do. We don't have any boundaries. We have not learned how to say no. And so we're not only
Mm.
tired, we've, exhausted our adrenals, we're out of balance, we're not getting sleep, we're stressed out, but on top of it, to add insult to injury, nobody is ever as pleased as we expect them to be. So the payoff is never as juicy as we're hoping. Like
We're
people might say,
disappointed.
yeah, people might say thanks, but they're not like, it's not like they're like having a whole
Totally.
parade for us.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we end up kind of pissed off. And resentment is one of those personality traits as well, is that we're really good at like burning with resentment because we don't speak up. That's another trait, is that we're not good at speaking up for ourselves. So we end up just burning with resentment. And there's no better prescription for, and I deserve it binge than to be like overworked and underappreciated. And that's what we do. We go home and binge. Well, at least I'll acknowledge myself. And that's just such a good example of how the choices we're making in our lives are contributing to our eating. And
Yeah.
that's really where we need to put the focus, instead of on the calories, instead of on the diet and all that stuff. I mean, frankly, I mean, there's jillions of books on Amazon. They all basically say the same thing, like eat healthy, eat organic, eat green, vegetables, healthy fruits,
Eat enough protein and fat to fill you up. And yeah, you're right. Like,
you
I
know,
feel like that's what, and I really appreciate how you meditate and you got that spiritual jive to you, because you're right. Like, this whole eating thing, it's about spirituality. It's about like it's about the life choices you're making. It's not about, weight loss is like the symptom, right? So it's
yeah,
about like how you're relating to life. And also, I think you bring up just a little side tangent too about the self care. I think self care is amazing, it's needed. But you bring up such a good point too, that, if you're saying yes to everything, if you're not setting boundaries in relationships, like that's an equally important part of the self care practice. You can take as many hot baths as you want, but if you're not actively, you know, saying no sometimes,
yeah,
y- you got like zero chance of doing this if you're not saying no at all. You gotta say no sometimes. You gotta
no
draw that
question.
boundary. And I really appreciate right now how you're really bringing things back to what is it for you? Is it I'm saying spirituality? Like just becoming a better person, or evolving yourself. To me,
Yeah.
that's tapping into your inner light more and more and being able to skillfully
Well,
navigate.
absolutely. I mean, it's a lot of things. And that's why I really kind of built up this whole system for overcoming emotional eating. It's very step by step. It's not hit or miss. It's pretty much like if you do it, it works. But it involves a lot of different elements. So the self care is an element. The 3 meal magic, eating 3 meals with nothing in between. I don't get real ninja or into what to eat, because I want people to get in touch with their body's needs. It's like we always want somebody to give us the diet, but that's not sustainable. Like we have to start seeking within what that needs to be. And that's where the meditation, that's where the self-care comes in, because we'll get quieter, we'll get still, we'll start tapping into what we need. It's all about coming in alignment with ourselves. So the spirituality helps
Hmm.
with that. But the bottom line is I need to make peace with myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to get okay with
100%.
Tricia, so I'm not always working against myself. I'm not always having this conversation of I suck and everybody else is better. It's like we have to get to where we just really feel peaceful with ourselves. And it's a journey. Like there's
Yeah,
no
yeah, yeah.
destination. I'm still on that journey, but
For sure.
just coming to where we're okay being who we are. Because I spent so many years trying to be somebody I wasn't, because I
Hmm.
just believed who I was not going to cut it.
Hmm.
And that
Yeah.
goes way back. It goes back to trauma. It goes back to sexual abuse, different, whatever people have experienced that gave them the messages that they're not okay.
Hmm.
Alcoholic parents who rage and say, I wish you were never born. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that leads
Neglect,
to that.
neglect, neglect. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Where we just get the message that who we are is not enough, and we have to like reparent ourselves and get to that
Yeah.
place where we
Yeah.
are enough. And the self-care is really building that message. It's like, how do you build self-esteem? Well, by self-esteemable
Yeah.
acts. We have to act
Exactly.
in self-esteemable ways. And taking time
Absolutely.
for ourselves, even making a salad at home, that's a self-esteemable act because we're taking the time and saying, I deserve to take 20 minutes to cut the carrots and cut the celery and put it all in a bowl. Like there is something spiritual about that in and of itself. It's self-care, it's self-acknowledgement. It's putting out to the universe that I matter to take this time. Like I'm not just on the run all the time, eating in the car, just running, running, running. Like I'm taking time for myself, and it's definitely not a waste of time because I'm building into my consciousness that I matter, my body matters, and I'm worth caring for it.
I love it. Where can people reach you, contact you? Where are you at
Sure.
these days?
I'm my website is healyourhunger.com. That's healyourhunger.com. I have a quiz. I didn't mention this, but
I was just gonna say, yeah.
on my website, there's a quiz that'll help you determine if you're an emotional eater or a food addict, and or somewhere in between. And I always tell people take the emotional eating quiz and find out where you are. Get a personalized score so you know, because depending on where you are in that spectrum is going to really inform what you do about it. I really think everybody is an emotional eater. Just a little little
Oh, totally.
like spoiler alert. Like everybody
Yeah,
has
everyone is.
right.
Yeah,
We all have emotional connections to food, but not everybody's a food addict or
yeah.
somewhere in between. So if you take that quiz, you can learn more. And I also have a Facebook group called The Secret Sauce to End Emotional Eating. So anybody's welcome to check that out and join us there. And I do a lot of cool things in there and giveaways and day, not daily, but very several times a week talks in there.
And so the links to the Facebook group and your website will be down below in the show notes or on the blog post, wherever you're reading this or listening to this. And I want to end, Tricia, with a question I always ask people. It's what's your biggest eating enlightenment, your biggest mental shift, your biggest perspective change, one of the biggest lessons you've learned? If you had to sum it all up in like a succinct statement, what would you say?
I would say it's not about the food.
I love it.
It's just it can seem it's not about the food and the weight. It can seem like it when your house is on fire. When you feel fat, when you're like you're not fitting in your jeans. I know it feels like it's about the weight, or it's about the food, but it really isn't. Like that is a symptom, and you got to go deeper in order to really heal the true cause, and then the weight will take care of itself.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Jared. It's great to be here. I appreciate you and all the wonderful work you do in the world.